Thank you so much for joining Clout101. I really, really appreciate your time that you're giving me on this weekday evening, to have this conversation. How's everything on your side?
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much, and I'm super excited. Let's dive right in. How about for yourself?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm good. It's good to talk with you. I know it's been a long time coming since our NBA days.
Yeah,
So good to see you doing good things. And I think this conversation is going to be very productive for the community of creators that are trying to figure out how to grow their audiences and learn from people like you who are building something special. So again, thank you for kind of taking the time to join.
for sure.
So I think how I want to structure the conversation is, first and foremost, talk about some of the early career stuff. I think that's important to kind of lay the foundation. Obviously, burying the lead is the explosive growth you've seen over the last, I'd say last year, correct?
Yeah, really
How
last
long has it
six
been?
months. It's
Last
even
6 months.
sooner. Yeah,
Okay, cool. So last 6 months of that explosive growth on multiple platforms. But I think it's important for the listeners and for the general community to just understand, who you are and where, maybe some of these interests, sparked from, to kind of get the lay of the land. I wanna start. I have as early as your Stanford days, but I guess I want to ask you: was there any, I guess, time prior to college that you kind of took an interest to communications that you kind of leaned in and said that this was what I wanted to pursue at a high level?
I didn't know whether I'd want to be a communications professional when I was little, but I can recall idolizing Marv Albert, Mike Breen, Mike Fratello as play-by-play broadcasters. And it actually inspired me to go to Stanford and cover Stanford women's basketball. Chinea Gumake, for example, and NECA and the whole squad. And I remember as a kid actually going to my backyard, lowering my basketball hoop to like 7.5 feet and impersonating like Shaq, Kobe, Dikembe Mutombo, Bimbo Coles
Yeah.
while I was announcing these players. Literally like every single day. That was my free time. I would be spending my time for like hours just doing that. So that was where I knew I loved talking. My family actually would tell me, Preston, you were speaking to walls at 2 years old in your own language, but you were
That's crazy.
nonstop talking. So I have a feeling that for me, talking was just in me, but I didn't start professionally thinking about it until actually in college.
Got it. How did you, well, first of all, shout out to Chennai and Nneka. Those are
Shout
legends.
out.
So what was the transition like? So you said you started thinking about it when you got to college. Obviously, the love for Marv, the love for, some of those, athletic figures, that kind of, got you excited, for the idea of broadcast. I know you did play by play, for the Stanford, men's basketball team. So like, how did that come to play? Kind of talk through that and what was that experience like?
For me, I didn't know that communication would be something I would study and focus on. But what I could tell you is that I actually suffered from a learning disability growing up. It was auditory processing disorder. So it actually prevented me from being able to comprehend a lot of information. And as a result, whenever I was in a lecture and I need to give a summary of anything I heard in class, even in Stanford, I felt very self-conscious because I would babble. I would
Yeah.
just meander and talk. And I felt that self-consciousness really weigh on me throughout anything I did. And it was only when I was commentating for basketball when I began to show that energy and I could articulate a game in front of my eyes 2.5, 3 hours at a time, no problem. And so what ultimately was the turning point for me was realizing at my corporate job, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the same position that I was back at Stanford when I was put on the spot to try to summarize a book that we read.
Yeah.
And I was awful. And I was like, why is it that my experience covering play by play was so different from just my communication skills at work, even socially? I mean, I was super awkward in college. I didn't even know how to approach anyone, like friends, girls, like I was awful. And I think that pain point is frankly what was the catalyst into then me becoming just obsessive about it. I would say probably about 2 years into my professional life.
Gotcha. What other things? So you mentioned the learning disability. I think that's important to kind of flag, and thank you for sharing that. I did not know. What other things kind of helped? Was it mainly like the coursework that you were doing, around communications and taking some of the principles you were learning in class and applying it to your real world? Or was it, did you do Toastmasters or, things of that nature on the side to help build the skill set as you were a student, a practitioner of communications?
It's funny, I was actually a communication major at Stanford, and despite that, I couldn't tell you anything practical related to public speaking or
Gotcha.
on the spot stuff that I'm doing. It was much more focused on actually on like human computer interaction, which
Okay.
influenced my side projects that I did afterwards. But the foundations that I got weren't from any sort of training. I didn't even do Toastmasters because I felt like it was an awkward setting. Instead, I focused on venues where I naturally had the most interest, and that goes back to basketball. In fact, I don't mean to harp on it, but it is actually super formative to what I did and how, to answer your question, like how I became into communication and studying it. I would actually mute games. So I would watch entire games on YouTube if I could find them, or just on the broadcast, and would bring up my laptop and I'd have the stats page right in front of me. And I would just practice recording myself on GarageBand at the time. I don't know if you remember that software. I used to rap, and I used to use that same software for writing songs as I would for doing my play-by-plays. And that in and of itself was super fun. That's all I did. I didn't actually study it. The only time I studied communication at school was when I was building a website, and it was intended to study the best commentators in sports. And I would just study the likes of Mike Mayock, if you remember him. He was with the Oakland Raiders at one point, or Vegas Raiders, and he was a great NFL Network analyst. And I just loved how he broke things down, but did so articulately. Like, there was no wasted motion. And I was like, how did he do that? So I just started finding commentators like that, and I would break down the film, and I would do my own commentary over their commentary to be like, what did he say that resonated? And I just did that for a school project, and it just expanded from there.
Yeah, that's fire. I love that idea. I think I don't know if it was Charlemagne the God or another like radio personality mentioned that to get better at interviews, that's what they did. So it's almost like you
Yeah.
listen to Oprah, ask someone a question, the person replies, and then you pause and figure out what you would say to kind of carry the conversation forward, and then obviously play it to hear what Oprah says as a follow-up question. So I think that's like a really cool practical exercise to kind of use to get that real world experience as you mentioned around something that you love in the game of basketball that you can probably speak about forever, have stats memorized in your head. So I think that's a really cool suggestion for sure.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So you also said obviously some of the real world experience, right, also helped as well. In addition to some of those things that you mentioned, you had a lot of your career is interesting, man. You have a lot of really highlight moments across the board. Internship with Turner and ESPN. Obviously we talked about our time together at the NBA. So you were there in the global partnerships team for 3 years, CBS for 2 years on the digital marketing side. And then now at Lucid for going on 3 years. So that's obviously the corporate journey. We also have a founder, track that we want to talk about as well. But like from a corporate perspective, just like talk to me about some of those scenarios where you were put in that kind of put the communications to the test and helped you develop as a leader, as a speaker, and develop that communication skill set.
A lot of my inspiration for going to communication comes from pain. And the specific pain I can remember was when one of my managers gave me work to do. She gave me a deck to create, and I worked for hours on it at a time. I can remember like every single night, 3 hours. And then when we came to present to a client and I was put on the spot to present, I didn't know what to say. And I was reading the slide deck, and she turned to me and said, and I was like, dang, like I put in all that work for nothing. And it wasn't until that moment happened when I finally realized that it's not about what you do, it's about how you communicate it. Because if they don't resonate with what you say, it doesn't matter. So I was like, okay. From that moment on, I was more intentional about my communication. And so I worked specifically at the NBA doing partnership management. As you know, my friend, you did the same. And we were managing various accounts. I was on the consulting side where I would build out sponsorship packages specifically for those accounts. And while I didn't get a chance to present all the time, I did get a chance to present to our internal stakeholders, like our BD teams, our executive teams, to get their buy-in to go pitch what we delivered. And even in those conversations, I felt like anything that I was saying, I remember trying to present a pitch to sponsor for Gatorade to sponsor the NBA Development League at the time, which is now called the NBA Gatorade League. You might remember that. I was helping out in creating that package. And when I tried to deliver that pitch to the VP of sales, I literally was like, going into the details. And he said, Preston, you have to level out. He said, Preston, tell me why I should care up front. And I went through that. I was like, I don't know. I'm trying to go through all the details. And he's like, no, one sentence. Just tell me. And it was then, and I was like, okay, there's power in simplicity here. So I just try to apply that principle throughout my career in corporate. And the MBA was the catalyst for a lot of that. There's a lot when it comes to communication. It's not just about like getting buy-in. It's also about influencing others, right? On various teams that I worked with. And that part, candidly, I'm still learning. I mean, I think the great thing about it is I now am so hyper conscious of what I say that even after this call, I'm going to watch the tape and be like, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? So I don't know. I hope that answers your question somewhat, but it does start with a pain at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I can empathize with that. I studied marketing in college, but I started off, I was an actuarial science major and a journalism minor. So it's crazy.
Oh, wow.
And I pivoted to marketing. But when I was doing journalism, I was contributing to a lot of publications, and like my style of writing was more like a New York Times, right? Like it was very 1,000 words, a lot of vocabulary that's unnecessary, and I had to learn how to kind of simplify things. I'm still struggle to that to this day to this day, but definitely in corporate that's something that I was also given that same level of feedback. You spend a lot of time putting into some of those presentations, and you want to make sure that it lands, and it won't land if you're too focused on the granular, kind of, as you said, zoom out, tell the story, more storytelling, and then from there you use those decks or those follow-up memos to then drill in the specifics. You're totally right. A lot on the job training, as they say, right?
You learn a lot that way.
Yeah. So, all right. So the corporate career is obviously there. Simultaneously, though, you have two different founder stints that I want to talk about. So one with OpenStory, which served as a public speaking coach, so providing the one-on-one coaching for entrepreneurs, for students, job applicants, focused on presentation skills. And then another founder, I think you were co-founder at Tiger Talk, if I'm not mistaken. Where teams could kind of practice and get feedback on communication skills. So just talk me through that, like what influenced those two opportunities, what did you learn about yourself and just about the pain points of your communications clients through that process?
Yeah, so I'll start with how I even began to build those companies. And really, it all came down to a moment in 2019 in the summertime when I was interning at MIT Startup Accelerator, because this was right before I got into MIT Sloan. And I observed some of the smartest people I ever encountered. And a lot of engineers, business folks who were just building startups as part of this accelerator. And as part of that program, they had to pitch their products to a board for funding. And the number one thing every single one of them struggled with was the ability to storytell, to bring their audience along for the ride and to have them empathize with the pain that they were trying to solve with their products. And I actually was able to leverage some of what I learned at the MBA at CBS when it came to brand storytelling, marketing, that helped them prepare for those meetings. And that was the light bulb moment for me, which was like, oh, wow, like this communication thing that I kind of took for granted my whole life actually can help people in ways I never expected. So when I got to Sloan, I was very committed from day one. And I chose Sloan for this reason, to build a company. Like, I didn't care about my classes. I was just there, frankly, to do three things. One is find my wife, which, check,
Yeah.
I'm glad I found my
There
wife.
we go.
That's the most important one. I got to lead with the most important. The
Secures the
second,
bag.
though, yeah, exactly, man. We've been married now for a couple of years. She's my rock. She's everything to me. And
Man, congrats.
thank you, thank you. But yeah, the second thing was to start a company, and the third thing was to make a lot of friends. And COVID put a damper on that a little bit, but it did help me focus on the startup. And I wanted to do something where I felt like I actually had a bit of an advantage. And that to me was in speaking. So I was inspired by what Duolingo did around democratizing language learning, but I thought, could you do the same with public speaking? And so that led down this rabbit hole of, let me just get practice coaching people for free, which led to the OpenStory consultancy. And then I actually made a pitch out to a technical co-founder, because I don't have a technical bone in my body, believe it or not. And I put it out on LinkedIn, and my now good friend, his name is Avinash Jain. He found my pitch that I put out on YouTube for a technical co-founder. And he's like, hey, I built a prototype actually that does exactly what you're describing, of helping people get automatic feedback on their speaking skills. And I had that same mission. So we met over Zoom, and actually we were basically co-founders ever since for more than 3 years, building that tech company. You know, we were essentially a bootstrap software platform, and we predominantly served speech and debate programs in high school to help them improve their speaking skills. And at the time with COVID, they didn't have ways to practice in person. So our platform served as a mechanism for them to do that. And as I was doing that, we ended up folding the business, but I learned a ton, because not just about communication, because I spoke to hundreds of coaches to build up that product, but also I learned about what not to do as a founder. So that's kind of how it all landed.
Yeah, those are the most valuable lessons, right? What not to do. I think everyone's looking for give me the roadmap, but if you can eliminate things along the way, the path starts to take shape. So I think that's one of the things that failed, quote unquote, failed startups, or startups that don't exit the way we all want it to. You know, you can still take a lesson from there to kind of move that to the next experiences. So, shout out to you for that.
Thank you.
So, transitioning to social media, I wanna talk about that. So, like, when did you decide? Because I know you've always been on Instagram, right? I think we all have personal pages and stuff like that. But when did you decide that you want to use social as, you know, a distribution channel to try to reach the masses?
I decided back in August of 2022 that I would do this. And the reason why I decided back then was because I knew that I wanted to build something, but I just didn't know what. And I knew that coding wasn't the solution for me, because I wasn't great at it. So I thought, if I can't code, maybe I can create media. Because to me, being on the internet and scaling yourself can either come from code or media. And so with that, I was like, well, and my wife really encouraged me to go down this path. I was just like, hey, I'm going to see if I like being a content creator. And I didn't even know that communication would be my thing back then. I was just like, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks. I'm going to time box it. And in those 2 weeks, my only goal is to figure out, do I like this thing of making videos, or do I hate it? And 2 weeks in, probably got 30 people look at my videos. My first one, my mom, my dad, maybe my wife saw it. It took me more than 2 hours to create. But I found that just the act of making progress on something was enough for me to be like, okay, there's something here. And the takeaway there is that for me, it's all about experimentation still for my business to get to hopefully where I'm trying to go.
Yes. During that 2 week period, I'm curious, because I know a lot of people, when they're starting out, they struggle with this. Did you almost like spend a day or two as like content days to build up like a Rolodex of content and then like schedule it over those 2 weeks and then watch performance? Or did you set a daily goal of like every day, set up my, my camera, record, edit, and post?
The latter.
The latter.
I focused exclusively on take it a day at a time. I had no plan in terms of what I was going to say.
Hmm.
I just said, okay, what's the first thing that I want to talk about?
Yeah.
And I just pressed record. And I probably spent way too many hours on CapCut afterwards
Yeah.
trying to make it right. But yes, like looking back, I cringe at those videos. But, candidly, I'm happy that I'm cringing at it because at least it's shown some growth over that time.
What about platform of choice? Did you prioritize one over the other, or did you just like have concepts that you ideated on and then said, okay, let me like create and tailor for every platform and then just see what works?
Again, more of the latter. I was
Okay.
not specific to a particular platform, but I did know that video was where I wanted to focus because I naturally knew I like to talk more than write. And I wanted that to be my foundation for what I did. I will also say that I was intentional about doing short form because I knew that it's based off the interest graph with a lot of these social platforms versus your follower count when you go short form. So with that in mind at the time, I was like, it's also just allows me to go faster in creating videos too. So once I just created some short form minute or under videos, I was like, whatever platform takes that, I'll post it and see what happens.
That makes a ton of sense. One thing I love about your content, right, is very diverse. It covers a number of different like spectrums, right? So I've seen the framework models, right? So different frameworks you can use to communicate better. I've obviously seen you just give like your tips based on industry experience, life experience. I've seen case studies. I think the one that stood out was, I think it was John Morant. I think it was like a
Oh,
focus on
yeah.
body language. So case studies of real life stuff that people can, resonate with, and they're seeing it
Yeah,
play
yeah.
out in real time, and you're breaking it down from a communication point of view, also best practices. So like there are different sub, I guess, genres under the umbrella that you can focus on. What, how did you, I guess, come up with the strategy of what to focus on? And then also, as you've been posting, have you been like using feedback from your followers as like means to validate what you want to double down on?
So just to reframe it, is the
Hmm.
question like, how did I end up choosing the verticals or sub-verticals of my content strategy?
Yep, exactly. So what inspired you to, choose those verticals, and then also how are you kind of iterating, what are you using as like feedback to validate what you
Mm,
want to spend more energy on versus the other? So case studies versus frameworks, or, tips versus best practices.
right. So how did I end up choosing the verticals first, and then what feedback mechanisms did I rely on? Well, from a strategic perspective, I started off with just, I know that I want to talk about communication and helping people improve that skill. I also knew that there are some great content creators in the space that were doing some interesting things. So I saw Charisma on Command. They were doing exclusively breakdowns of people in social scenarios. I saw folks like Vin and Yasser Khan who were giving straight practical advice as well. And I knew that, frankly, to start somewhere, it's often helpful to mimic what you see that works.
Yeah, for
And then
sure.
eventually, through that process, build your own style. So I knew that for me, content is an infinite game, meaning I don't have an end goal here other than I want to make this a part of my life until I am no longer here. And I knew that because of how much I enjoyed the process of even making a single video. So from that point, it was like, well, I just need to copy what I see. And those were some of those pillars that you're seeing, like breakdowns, but I wanted to do it around things that I cared about because I need to be true to myself. So I'm not doing breakdowns candidly on, every single political figure because that's not really where my interest is. But I am doing it a lot around basketball, as you know, because I love
sure.
basketball. So I wanted to be genuine with what I cared about, but also take inspiration from the likes of those successful folks. And over time, that vertical just started to expand across different categories as I was inspired by different things. And that's really how it evolved.
Yes. Nice. How long did it take you to get to 100K on Instagram? Do you remember?
It took me, well, from the very beginning, probably about 18 months. But really, the growth from like 3,000 to wherever I am now, I think it's like 120, like 3,000 to 120. That was in the past probably 4 months.
Do you know what your higher performing buckets of content has been over that, that period that you just mentioned?
I do. I do. I would say that the top performing ones are where I'm either providing framework based content, just very practical to the point to help people improve their speaking, or helping them improve their delivery. So their articulation, like how they say the words that they say. That has actually resonated quite a bit. It's been less so on the breakdowns, funny enough, like the John Morant's and those types of things, but
Yeah.
I'm willing to go back down that well and see if I can pick things up again there too.
Yeah. I think the one that I keep seeing, obviously we follow each other on social, so I see your content all the time, but the one that keeps populating on my feed and my explore page, and the one that I had at least one or two people send me in the past was the exercise where you put the was it the pencil in the mouth?
Yeah, the pen game. Yeah.
The pen. Can you explain that for folks who didn't see? I also link it as well, but
Yeah, for sure. And I was trying to find so the idea is in order to sound very clear and articulate whenever you want to speak, you can practice this simple exercise where you take a pen, you put it in between your teeth like this, and you say the alphabet A to Z. So it can sound like A, B, C, D, and so on. And the intent is that it's basically like weight training for your speech. It's resistance training, but by putting a pen in your mouth, it forces you to over enunciate and move your tongue and your lips farther than they would have ever gone before. So I started with that. That video actually took off like several million views on TikTok. And it was that moment where I was like, oh, I should like double down on this. So then I went through like tongue twister exercises and different speech games. And that actually made me realize that there is an authentic spin I could take here where I'm serving, and then naturally sort of realize this, but I could be serving non-native English speakers who want to sound more fluent in English, particularly when they're in a corporate environment, when they want to go from manager to leader and they feel that their language is impeding them from doing so.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good call. In my mind, I was thinking about the opportunity among the podcast space as well, because it seems like everyone, obviously, it's low barrier to entry, right? A lot of people have different ideas. Thousands of podcasts are being published, on the daily or debuted on the daily. So there's a large community of creators that have the resources to execute a podcast, but the formal training, they'll never go to school for journalism or communications, right? No one can expect that of them, but like binging on your page and learning a couple of tricks to be able to learn how to communicate better, I think that'll go a long way to making them more comfortable behind the mic. So maybe that's another subset of the creator community that you can target.
I love that. Thanks for the inspiration. I'll keep that in mind.
No worries. No worries. Another question I have. So you said 120 on Instagram. I think you have about 250 on TikTok?
Something like that. Yeah.
So I'm curious because I know a lot of people, again, we talked about short form and how short form is obviously a very easily consumable medium, and also platforms kind of give a lift when it comes to the algorithm and pushing it out, right, for visibility. So a lot of people create short form once and then they post the same on TikTok and Instagram, maybe change like the captions and the, the different titling and all that stuff, subtitles, they change that to reflect the platform. But I guess my question is, are you seeing the same pieces of content pop on both platforms, or is there, a different appetite on TikTok versus Instagram for the content that you produce?
The short answer is the content that I'm putting out on these platforms doesn't show any consistency when it comes to understanding what pops off and what doesn't. I can tell you that I've tried to study it, and candidly, I can't quite figure out why it is that certain pieces pop off and others don't. But what I can tell you is that there is at least a common trend in terms of the type of content that resonates. Whether which video pops off or not is hard to say. Yeah. So, for example, as I was saying, like the framework speaking, I did 2 videos on that, and I actually posted them all. I posted the same thing on TikTok as I do on Instagram. Almost nothing changes. But while one video got like 4 million views on TikTok, that same video maybe got a few thousand on Instagram. And then conversely, when I put out a video that was about 1.5 minutes long about the same topic, it popped off on Instagram with like 1 million views, and it's got like maybe a couple, like 10 to 20,000 on TikTok. So again, it's hard, but my rule of thumb is like just produce. Like I have 2 pieces of content I try to put out every single day, and I make no excuses around that. Or at least on average, I'm putting out 2 a day. And that in and of itself, I think, is really the magic ticket, if you will, to seeing some sort of traction there.
Yeah, that's a good call. To that point, what advice do you have for creators that work a full-time job but are hoping to build, their platform on the side? They can hopefully one day become, match or exceed what they're making in their main, where they can replace their full-time job. Putting out 2 pieces of content a day, that's a lot. Some people can't even do one. Some people who don't have a full-time commitment can't even do one. So what has been your ability to balance, all of that too? And then what are some tips you have for people looking to be as efficient as you?
So what specifically do I do that's helped me balance the full-time job and this creator business? Well, I can give you 3 things that have stood out. So the biggest thing I would say is time boxing. So I give myself at most 3 hours a day to work on my business. And during those 3 hours, I schedule exactly what I want to do the night before. And that way I have a clear goal and a forcing mechanism so that I know and I push myself to get that thing done in that time frame, because my family life is very important and I want to balance that. So that's the first thing, is I time box myself. The second is I actually batch a lot of what I do. So when I record, I sit down and I'll bang out 20 to 30 shorts in one sitting. Yes. And when I do that, I'm actually not scripting. I have not scripted a single video that you've seen since August of 2023, which is around the time when I started to see some growth.
Yeah.
And that process in and of itself has helped me. Just like, hey, one take, do it. Like, just see what happens. And don't be filtering yourself too much. Just get it out there. Yeah. Because to me, perfection is the enemy of progress. And then the third thing that I did is I focused on outsourcing specifically to an editor. So my goal, and I take a lot of credit, I give a lot of credit to Ali Abdaal, because I attended his part-time YouTuber Academy. Yes. And one of the things I learned in that program is like the best first hire you can make as a video creator and entrepreneur is an editor. So I invested in an editor who still works with me to this day. It's been almost a year of working with him, and he's been great. Farhad, I give a shout out to Farhad. He and I have been working closely for almost a year, and that has tremendously offloaded the amount of effort that I put in. So I don't edit any of my videos now. So my goal with all that said is to build systems to delegate the work that I frankly don't want to do and only focus on what I want to do, which is frankly to be doing stuff like talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's entirely correct. I totally agree with that. I think that's another kind of takeaway that I guess I've learned on the corporate side that I'm open to funnel into, my entrepreneurial ventures is the importance of outsourcing. You saw like at the league, we'd hire agencies to execute the work that we have for our high level partners, right? And it's like if companies with thousands of headcount around the world and a lot of monetary resources, if they could do that and outsource and then project manage from there, why can't creators do the same thing and figure out how to just offload some of those responsibilities so that way you're able to focus more on strategy
Yeah.
and other forms of execution. So I
Yeah,
totally
and
agree.
just to add on to that point, you brought up something I hope the audience remembers, and it's something I learned from a book where it was like, I think I forgot the book's name, but it was essentially you don't want to work in your business, you want to work on your business.
Mm.
You don't want to work in your business, you want to work on your business. And that candidly is something I got to work on because I can be a control freak at times. I know it, but that philosophy of like building your org chart and identifying the key things that need to get done, their P0 level activities,
Yeah.
and just like what needs to happen to make that sing. And then what can you bring yourself out of to keep that going? That's really, I think, the magic of business building, frankly.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally agree. I want to transition a little bit into talking a little bit more about making money and different business models that creators can kind of pursue. And I know this is something it's not an exact science. So this is something that I do in my day to day. I know you're exploring these as well, and a lot of creators are also trying to figure it out because it's very uncertain when it comes to consistency across monetization. But I just wanted to have a free flowing conversation about it. I saw some things that you're doing that I love. So at least from outside looking in, and you can correct me if I'm wrong if I miscategorize some of these things, but it seems like your goal on social media is the mass adoption, right? Like sharing, educating your viewers on communications, as casting the net as wide as possible and making sure as many people get the resources as possible. It seems like then you're funneling them into, a speaking course, a free speaking course opportunity, free speaking community where they can kind of commune and discuss amongst each other, learn different things and meet other people to be able to network with. You have your Beehive newsletter audience as well. I know you do the community. I think you mentioned a communications masterclass and then a one-on-one coaching
Yeah.
call as well. So I guess just
Wow,
like,
you did your homework, my friend.
yeah,
That's
man, yeah,
impressive.
yeah, man. And then also, I guess you could also throw in their ad revenue, from
Yeah.
different platforms like YouTube. I don't know if you reach monetization on those platforms yet, but that's also another channel that creators could use to be able to monetize their content. So I guess just give me your overall thoughts on that. Like what's working best for you? How are you enjoying it? And just some high level thoughts on it for people who are listening, trying to figure it out as well.
Yeah, that's the key is we're all trying to figure it out, and I'm definitely part of that camp. I can tell you what has worked for me and what I'm most excited about. So, what's worked for me is actually creating a cohort. I called it the Speaker Student Masterclass, and I limited it to about 20 people. I charged $500 for 1 month of basically exclusive access to me through one-on-one coaching. And in addition to that, weekly webinars where I would cover foundational skills. And I did that because I definitely undercharged, but I did that because I wanted to build a foundation of knowledge through teaching. I'm a big believer that I'll learn just as much as my students when I put myself out there and start coaching and I'm challenged with different questions. So that whole process was from basically January, the whole month of January. And I learned so much from that that I want to create more scalable offerings with. So online courses, paid memberships. I think that so that's been really my biggest source of income right now is the masterclass program for that month. And
Yeah.
what I'm really excited about is a few things. One is I think that memberships are growing. I've noticed a lot of creators build memberships around a topic that they embody and that they know their audience cares about. And for me, I wanted to do it around a category that I wanted to claim. So if I'm claiming impromptu speaking, if you see in my bio, it's everywhere, it's impromptu speaking, because I'm a big believer that if you're known for an idea, you stick.
Hmm.
And if you can create a movement around that idea, even better. One of the best ways you can do that is through community. I know that it's really tricky and I haven't figured it out quite yet, like how to keep everyone engaged in like a free community. But I do want to experiment with like paid memberships eventually. So I think that's one format that I've seen quite a few creators in different spaces do. I'm also, beyond just the online courses, which I think matter, like you can make a ton of money if you build a killer offering. Like I heard Justin Welsh say this and it never has left me. It's like you need one simple funnel. It's like clear content source, clear lead magnet, clear call to action, killer offer. And if you just like nail those four things, you could have a multi-million dollar business off that alone.
Yeah.
And that's what I've not yet achieved, but I want to get there. And then lastly, when it comes to like creator monetization, like I'm not as much into the ad revenue stuff, candidly. I've gotten approached for partnerships, but I only want to do it for products that I use. And for me, it's less so about that because I don't care as much about that, and more so about like, how do I like teach people it, and what are all the mechanisms to do that? So that could be like paid webinars, it could be online courses, one-on-one coaching, group coaching, which has become more popular in my field. So that's really what drives me. And frankly, like SaaS products now. I mean, now that we're at this stage of, you can build no code platforms, you can leverage AI to do certain things. Like, what are the clear use cases? So one thing that I've been considering is like an AI powered speech coach.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically off what I did with Tiger Talk, right? But can I use it in maybe a different format, like easy, bite-sized, digestible content that people can do every day to improve their articulation skills, something specific. But anyway, I could go on and on. I'm very passionate about this because my goal is to build many businesses around my passions, and doing so in this manner where content is the linchpin behind it all.
Yeah, no, I love everything you said. I totally agree. Justin Welsh is amazing. I have bought one of his operating system, I guess, courses in the past.
Nice.
I think for LinkedIn specifically. So he's amazing. I think he's built like maybe $2 million solopreneur businesses. So he's an amazing creator to follow, to kind of learn from. And also I think he was working on a SaaS product in the past, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was an executive level and then left to go, a better work-life balance. I think his wife is doing something similar as well. So that's amazing. And then from what you said about, some of the, I guess, monetization, like avenues, like I totally agree from the, the free media platform to kind of, attract people at scale, to some of the freebies, newsletter, as you mentioned, both free and also the freemium model where you have some upgrades that you can charge for, social media ad revenue. You mentioned brand partnerships, scalable services. I agree, man, from a SaaS perspective, from an AI perspective, like there's a lot out there. I'm actually working on one right now that's AI focused, and it's supposed to help creators with brand partnerships. So
Cool.
I think that's cool. Courses as well. You mentioned very, very effective. And then from the the high level one-on-one, high ticket consulting opportunities as well. So I think like things like that allow you to kind of check off the box of being able to provide value to different levels of consumer that have different appetite to spend.
That's right.
Yeah, I totally agree. From a follow-up question for you on the brand partnerships front, you said that you have been approached. I think you said you have been approached. So like what, I guess like in a perfect world, like what are you looking for out of those opportunities? What are some non-negotiables maybe that you have to be able to work with some of these brands, and just like what are your overall thoughts on the idea of partnership?
I'm a big believer in partnership. I even work in business development and partnerships now. So it's, and this, we came from a similar background. For me, as I'm building out my creator business, I am focused on partnerships that I think can drive me to my clear goal, which is, in this case for this business, to like empower the world with better communication skills. So companies that approach me that are a bit deviated from that mission are a non-starter for me. That's a very clear one. And then another one is, relatedly, if I don't use the product or know it that well, then it's hard for me to be genuine, because I want to be genuine when I create any content associated with a brand. I have been approached by one that I think, and I won't share the name yet because we haven't finalized anything, but like in a speaking space where it's like interesting, like, hey, we can, maybe there's something here. And I would say in general, like from a practical in the weeds partnership perspective, I would say this, I am reluctant to just give away my content on other platforms without having clear guidelines around what the agreement looks like. So I'm actually very wary of partnerships that are not in writing, because the moment something can go wrong, like let's say that your content's on the platform and then for whatever reason, the platform doesn't do well and your content is stuck there, and then that might affect your brand negatively. So like, what are the rules that you can put in place to ensure that there's a clear out for either side? Like things like that, I think are important. And just having worked in partnerships, I definitely want to ensure that it's a win-win truly, and that we're held accountable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That said, are there any dream collaborations that maybe you want to speak into the atmosphere, speak into the universe right now?
Dream
Either
collaborations.
creator collaborations, or you can say brand collaborations.
That's a great question. Okay, so for creator collaborations, I would go back to my days as a broadcaster. So if I were to collaborate with like Ernie Johnson or Mike Breen, right? Like Charles Barkley. I love how Charles communicates. The way he's so matter of fact, I would just love to have a conversation with him and like understand how he spoke, the way he speaks, and break it down afterwards. Like that would be the dream for me. I would pay for that, honestly. That's a dream. So that would be my ideal creator type of partnership. And then as for product or company, I don't have one that jumps to mind immediately, but I'd say that if it's like a products that I use are interesting. Like I love Airtable and Notion for building out my systems to run my business. I mean, this microphone I've been using for over a year and I love it. Like whatever company you find. It's a Fifine. I don't know how to Fifine. I don't know, but like, hey, I might do something with them. Like people that I use, really, I'm down for.
Got it. You kind of crept into the next question, which was like, what's part of your creator toolbox? So any like equipment, resources, any tools. So you mentioned Airtable, you mentioned Notion. I love both of those. You mentioned the microphone. Any other platforms or tools that you feel creators can kind of leverage?
Yeah, and if you like, I'm happy to share links to a few of these items too, just for your audience. But I'll start with the content let me back up. I'll start with the material, the products that help me get started, like get going. And then I'll walk you through the products that help me grow, like once I've gotten going. So on the get going side, I would start with like a Joby camera stand. It's actually one that I use every day when I record, and a simple Rode Video Mic Pro 2 that I use like every video for the first year. Because to me, like the audio quality gives you the most credibility when you're first starting out. It's less so about having a fancy camera. So that was one. And then I got 2 softbox lamps that helped me with my lighting, because that was the second piece of making your content look more professional, is your lighting after you've addressed the audio. So happy to share those links. That's what I would start with when I'm getting going. In terms of my stack, like how I'm running my business, if that's what you're getting at, I'll go in order of like the actual flow from content to sale. So it starts with content. And what I use, I'm actually building out a system, and I haven't built it fully yet, but I think it's going to be awesome for my business. And it's off of Stephen G. Pope has created a content academy. And it's essentially a way that he built of like stitching together different products like Airtable, Zapier, ChatGPT, Google Drive, Frame.io. And he's created a system where you can easily organize, manage, and distribute your content from your Airtable base. It's your master database. So I'm building this now following his program, and I bought all the software to help me just go at scale in distributing my content. So that to me is like, I'm super, super excited about. That's a big focus. And then besides that, once I've created the content, I then have, as you mentioned, Beehive for my newsletter. I use School for my free community, which they charge just $99 a month. So they don't have like a certain member limit. You can have as many as you want, which is really nice. It's like a flat fee. And from there, I use, not like I used to use a lot of Descript. I don't use it as much anymore with my editors now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but that's like the main stuff.
You said CapCut before, so we were.
CapCut was another editing one I used. Yeah, for sure. And I still use it from time to time whenever I decide to record a random video on my phone.
Got it. What is one more question before we do a quick rapid fire? So like what's one skill that you recommend each creator, listener, kind of adopt to become better at branding this year and beyond? So obviously we have communication down pat. I know that would be the number one skill to master your communication. But what other things do you feel could be helpful from a skill set perspective?
Is it okay if I give two?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give the first one I'll say is community building. I think that is the future for a lot of creator-led businesses. And it is really hard to get community right. Yeah. How do you drive engagement and create a movement? And that is an area I really want to hone because I'm not there yet. But I can tell you for a fact, if you look at a lot of the businesses out there in the creator space, like community is a linchpin to that. So that's one. The second skill that I would encourage folks to develop is actually counterintuitive, but it's like eliminate your filter. And here's what I mean. We often, when we start out, are so worried about being polished and being presentable. And I tell this to my clients all the time. If you just get the practice of speaking aloud, like remove the filter of whatever it is that's blocking you from doing whatever you want to do. Again, perfection is the enemy of progress. And just put out something like your first video. Just get in the habit of doing one a day. Like I'm telling you, my friend, like that is the thing that blocks people the most. I've gotten countless folks ask me like, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I'm like, dude, just start. Just press record. And I can't tell you how many times people don't do that, especially at a consistent pace. That to me is the key. It's like, be consistent. Like I love what Gary Vee says. He's like, if you're putting out one video a week, that's way too little. Put one video a day, that still is too little. Like he's putting out 4 or 5 and yeah, he's got a team. I get it. But like I'm trying and I'm a mighty team with me and my 2 editors and I'm working a full-time job and I'm trying to go minimum 2. So if I can do it, I know others can do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's very helpful. And, yeah, I think hopefully there's an uptick in daily content, distribution after this video. All right, I want to transition into a quick rapid fire round. So I have a couple of questions for you. So first one, what's one book, podcast, or content series that has helped you along your creator journey?
Made to Stick by Chip Heath.
Chip Heath, okay.
Made to Stick by Chip Heath.
Okay, and what's the S?
It's about telling sticky stories. 6 principles.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. I'm gonna purchase that as soon as we finish. So, one creator that you follow that inspires you.
Besides Justin Welsh, I would say 2: Matt Gray and Ali Abdaal.
Yeah, Matt Gray is dope. I like his content as well. What's one brand that you appreciate and that you model your business after?
Sorry, clarifying question. When you say brand, can that be a person or is that like a company you're looking for?
I was thinking more company,
Okay.
but if you don't have company, we can go with
Okay. So company, Notion,
Notion.
and person, I just love Justin Welsh, man.
Yeah, me too. Okay, cool. Sounds good. We have to send this to him after the interview because
For sure.
we've given him a lot of
We give him a lot of love.
a lot of praise,
Unintentional. Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Justin Welsh. You probably don't
Yeah,
even know
man.
me, but I've been following him for years.
Yeah, no, for sure. Best piece of advice that you've been given to date, and I guess you funnel it through the lens of like creating.
My two biggest ones, find an editor ASAP before like don't waste your time and just press record.
Nice. And then I guess this is more of a personal question. Who's on your board of directors and what's their relation to you? So assuming this is Preston Incorporated, who's on your board and what's their association with you?
Ooh, on my board. Okay. So I'm gonna say so. I'm gonna tweak it slightly. I mean, I know this is rapid fire, but bear with me.
Okay.
When board of directors is mentioned, I almost think of like investing in your business, like investors. And I've actually purposely tried to stay away from the VC backed path. But if I were to talk about advisors, like purely in that sense, then I will go a couple folks. It'll come off maybe as a surprise. I'm gonna go with Ali Wong. I would go with, frankly, LeBron James and how he's built his empire, or Kevin Durant, but probably LeBron. I go with LeBron. And then I would go with Justin Welsh. I mean, you asked. I was like, he knows his stuff, man. Like,
I was gonna say it, but I was like, let me.
I mean, you kind of led me to that one. I wasn't gonna mention his name like 4 times in this podcast, but every
Okay.
question you ask,
Look,
yeah.
man.
And I'll give you one more, and I would say it's cheesy, but my wife.
Yeah, no. That's not cheesy at all. That's not cheesy at all. You mentioned that she's contributed to a lot on your journey, so I think that's important to give her flowers as well. So
Yes.
nice. That's a wrap. Thank you for joining, man. I appreciate this. This conversation was very helpful. I know we're a little bit over, but I hope I didn't mess up your plans.
No, you didn't. It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me.